Ladies and gentlemen, I hope we have solved all the technical problems. Thank you very much for joining these discussions. Dear participants, dear speakers, I'm here to open this online discussion called Journey to a Post-Pandemic Destination for Business. And this is part of a regular series of online discussions organized by the EU-Turkey Friendship Group and the Institute for Non-Aligned Studies, together with numerous supporters and sponsors, which you can see depicted in the banner. My name is Dr. Michael Rupp, and I have the great honor to be the moderator of this today. We have around 50 minutes foreseen for this, and we have with us 6 distinguished speakers who will briefly introduce themselves when they're taking the floor for the first time. Each, please, for a maximum of 5 minutes for your introductory statements. The subject of this discussion today is Journey to a Post-Pandemic Destination for Business. And you can already see that when the topic was first developed, we were still under the optimistic impression that the pandemic is largely behind us. As all of you have witnessed, looking at the numbers rising throughout the world, this was, we can say now, over-optimistic. So what we want to discuss today is actually what can the travel and the transportation business look at in terms of business strategies to get companies, clients, as well as, of course, profits back to a level that is both safe and sustainable, and this probably during the ongoing pandemic. What can be innovative and creative ways to operate in this current pandemic and beyond? But not only business and business operators are in uncharted territory, but also politicians who accompany the new reality with legal and regulatory framework are in the process of feeling their way into this new world. Unfortunately, we have lost 2, hopefully only normal flu and normal sickness. Our honorable member, Peter Lundgren, who was supposed to speak first. So unfortunately, he cannot be with us. He had to cancel last minute from his sick bed. And so we are starting actually with Frank van den Steen, formerly of the Lufthansa Group. And like a few others here, you understand the business model and the issues facing the airline industry quite well. So please, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much for having invited me to this panel with distinguished guests, and thank you for the audience for your interest and for tuning in. I hope you can hear me well. If you just give it a small thumbs up, that would be great. Excellent, thank you. So my name is Frank van den Steen. I was the commercial director for the Lufthansa Group in North Africa, Near East, and Turkey during 8 years until 2019. I then moved to Frankfurt as project manager and led a project to help to secure the company's liquidity during the COVID crisis. About 2 months ago, I've left the aviation industry, but now I'm still active as a consultant on various topics, including aviation, but also multicultural leadership and crisis management. Well, I think we all understand the seriousness of today's crisis. The travel and tourism sector is by far the most heavily impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, since the beginning of this year, almost every country in the world has shut down borders and limited domestic travel as a response to the pandemic outbreak. These flight cancellations have heavily impacted the global airline industry. Just in Europe, 6 million people risk to lose their jobs in the airline industry only. And it will take the industry until, well, at least 2024 to come back to its 2019 levels. If you look at the end of March this year, the airline capacity in Europe was down by almost 88% versus previous year. There was a gradual recovery in June, but this has not continued. And all major airlines are still at a level of much less than 50% of their production versus previous year, with overall drops of around 70% of passengers versus previous year. And the drops are even greater in the long-haul traffic. Now, despite the pandemic, the world remains closely linked economically and culturally. Free movement of people is essential to the functionality of the European single market. That's why it must be the common goal of the airline industry and politics to enable safe travel. Countries, regions, airports, and airlines have put measures into place to allow safe travel. Yet there are two main obstacles that refrain us from doing so. Now, firstly, there are the quarantine measures. Implementing quarantine is making it virtually impossible to travel. It's basically the same thing as saying don't travel, unless you're flying home and you can stay home for the next 2 weeks. That made sense for people returning from a red zone to their home in the early stage of the pandemic, when there was not enough tests available. But now we are beyond that situation. And because every country has a significant level of infection degree and testing facilities are widely available. Quarantine should therefore only be used for confirmed positive cases and not as a preventive measure, since it makes free movement and therefore travel impossible. Secondly, preparing for travel today requires a detailed research through official websites, and some travel agencies even have appointed specialists to stay up to speed with the requirements for every destination. Since every country or region is defining its own measures, the inconsistency is enormous, and measures can really range on a daily basis. Some countries, they require quarantine, others require a negative test with differentiated validity periods. Countries have different interpretations of so-called essential travel, and filling in a form also varies from country to country. Also, the rules for transit passengers also differ from country to country. In this respect, and the EU has done some good work in developing the newly introduced color map by the ECDC. This is, I think, the first step to a harmonized approach among the EU member states. Also, the EU Commission's website, reopen.europe.eu, is probably the best tool to shed some transparency in this jungle of measures. Yet, this is not enough. I mean, tackling these two hurdles, getting rid of quarantine and creating consistency between the member states, are the key steps to a minimum mobility that the industry and the economy urgently need. And that requires a unified European testing for travel protocol. Now, the only way to get rid of quarantine is the implementation of speed testing at the airports. It is possible to introduce 15-minute testing at the entrance of every main departure airport. And this way, every passenger can be required to present a negative test result before the flight. Some will say that these rapid tests are not as accurate as a normal PCR test, but it will still require wearing a mask at all times before, during, and after the flight. And every country can still require to have a second test at time of arrival if they want so. I'm convinced that with the implementation of these two measures, consistency and rapid testing before the flight by means of an EU unified protocol, the airline industry and the economy as a whole will receive a boost that they urgently need to survive. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much for this insightful analysis. I take note of the fact that you are singling out the Commission as a positive force, at least in trying to bring some order into the jungle, which is an important issue. So we can discuss this later. Next on my list is Samuel Doveri-Westerby, Managing Director at the European Neighbourhood Council. Please, you have the floor to make your introductory statement.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Hopefully, yes. So, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the event today. Special thank you to the organizers, and particularly EPEC, and for trying to organize an event during these difficult times, both in terms of difficulties related to the pandemic, but also difficulties related to the subject that I deal with the most, which is EU-Turkey relations, and especially economic relations between the EU and Turkey. It's important that organizations relentlessly try to continue to build bridges and increase dialogue, especially during these difficult economic and pandemic times. So the question I have to pose, and I must apologize for the moderator, I might speak 5 to 7 minutes because I have to leave a little bit earlier, so I will try to say as much as I can now. So my question is Turkey's current position today incompatible with the EU, and what does it mean for business and within the post-pandemic environment? So the short answer is that if you look at the media, unfortunately, the answer is yes, there's a high degree of incompatibility between Turkey and the EU today. But the longer answer is, of course, that both sides must need and have to accommodate one another if peaceful coexistence and especially mutual economic prosperity is desired. So Turkey has chosen a set of policies in Syria and Libya and with regards to Russia, which has erupted a long list of concerns and even suspicions on the side of the EU. And I'm sure that everyone here knows about these things, so I won't go into detail about that. And what Turkey is doing strategically by placing itself to an advantage across the neighborhood and across many of these regional countries in this difficult environment is, of course, not totally abnormal either. One has to some degree, empathize with the situation that Turkey is in as well geographically. But you also have to ask yourself one important objective question, which is how much does Turkey and its current government want to disrupt relations with its closest neighbor, namely the EU, and especially economically? It's understandable that Turkey is in a more vulnerable geography and is threatened by things like terrorism and the PKK. But is there a limit to the tensions with the EU, and where exactly is that limit? Won't it start to damage Turkey economically, politically, and on a longer term basis if relations continue like this, both in terms of its currency, employment, and trade? We often hear that Turkey doesn't have so many friends left, and this can increasingly become an issue if more trust and cooperation is not built between the EU and the most arguably modern European republic of Muslim population, which is Turkey. So the problem for Turkey, that is, if relations get worse, is that Ankara depends, of course, on the EU for trade, supply chains. Over 50% of Turkey's foreign direct investments basically come from the EU, and both the EU and Turkey remain deeply intertwined economically. Turkey is part of Europe's supply chains from China and most of Asia. And since we're talking about the post-pandemic world, those shifts are occurring quite rapidly. And Turkey can, of course, be placed in a role where it will play a larger and more important role in the supply chains of Europe. Turkey cemented to the EU customs union. That is one of the few, if not only, significant country that is not an EU member to be part of a non-tariff free zone, which is the customs union. And when one looks at trade volumes and the number of intertwined banking systems, they're also extremely high between countries like Spain and Turkey, but overall just between Turkey and the EU. Now, examples of shared challenges which are practically unsolvable without EU-Turkey cooperation include illegal migration flow, broader security concerns, energy, and of course also the prevention of radicalization. France today is a little over 1.5 years away from its presidency at the EU Council, and for anyone who deals with EU affairs, they know that that agenda is very important. Between now and then, relations could, of course, get worse, and they are currently getting worse, and they might end with the closing of accession between the EU and Turkey. The Turkish EU accession process is unfortunately a dysfunctional one, and I think everyone who has dealt with Turkey and the EU, both economically in terms of regulatory frameworks and also politically over the last many years, is fully aware about that. That's one of the reasons why we're in this mess today, maybe. We simply don't trust each other. And Turkey, of course, doesn't abide by the Copenhagen criteria like democracy, perhaps due to the lack of incentives to reform. as France is and has always been known to be an eternal obstacle and a veto for Ankara's accession bid. So logically, accession creates mistrust because it's built on an unworkable set of conditions and incentive mechanisms that no one truly believes in or even cares about. Europe wants Turkey to reform its democracy. That makes sense. But why would Erdogan risk losing any power? He knows he will never get into the EU anyway because France and other countries will block him. So this is a vicious cycle, which I think should be spoken out about more loudly, simply because it is fundamentally illogical. On top of that, as we Europeans and also Turks must acknowledge, is of course that the European electorate has spoken and has also moved further to the right wing, which simply makes accession unworkable. It is not compatible with the Europe of about 20 years ago. For the Turkish business community, and here it's important with regards to our event today, which will continue to need the EU, whether Turkish or French government likes one another or not. For the business community, they have to start preparing. It's in their interest. They need the EU as a supply chain endpoint and also as a consumer market. And they probably don't want to lose the most favorable trade deal in the history of the EU, which is the customs union. And especially if services and agriculture can be negotiated to be included at some point, it's an enormous benefit for the Turkish business community, especially during the times in which trend in economic affairs of protectionism and mercantilism is kicking in, which is likely to impact all of our economies increasingly. One preparation is, of course, the transition towards a new framework between the EU and Turkey, where customs union expansion and modernization should play a central role. France, which holds the presidency in 2022, could support such a re-engagement, provided that the accession process is replaced with a new and institutionalized framework of equal and special partnership, which takes into account a broader security perspective and also seriously listens to Turkey's concerns and position. However, this can only become a reality if the Turkish government shows a degree of willingness with regards to the EU. The past month, and especially the inflammatory comments by Turkish President Erdogan, have not been helpful in this respect. And it's particularly ironic to see the dispute between Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Emmanuel Macron, considering that what Macron is suggesting in this inflammatory speech that everyone talks about is really to nationalize Islam, which means no training of the imams abroad and no foreign funding to mosques, a type of secular certificate for mosques in France, and a degree of more Republican centralization. But actually, it's ironic because Turkey already very much does this, and very successfully, one may add, because Turkey has the Republican structure of the Diyanet, which is linked to the government and its institutions that appoint imams around the country. So I really hope that this does not escalate and that the dispute between Macron and Erdogan is quite visibly more about communication than any real substance.
Samuel, I think you have already run over your time, but thank you very much for the very interesting aspects in the discussion.
Thank you.
Pity that I hear that you have to leave, but I think we have to leave it there. We will now move to our next speaker, Mr. Fevzi Mentes, General Manager and board member of the Ulus Metal Polska. Mr. Mentes, please say a couple of words about yourself in this context and give us your view on the issue. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And it's my pleasure to be with this distinguished guests and the audience. I'm engineer and worked for 16 years in the household appliance industry in Turkey. And then in many different, let's say, sectors like marketing, sales, turnaround management. And lately I am here in Poland established a greenfield operations production for automotive industry, Ulus Metal Poland plant, which has already in Turkey two plants, two factories, a company existing for 50 years and working on automotive sector. So I would like to mention about this post-pandemic problems. Basically, this is giving example from my situation. I'm in Poland since 23 years, so I did a lot of different operations here, and this was the last one, Greenfield, which we established in 2018 and 2019, built the factory, started operation beginning of this year. So being a newbie here, this pandemic effect restricted us due for technical trainings, supports. In EU, even for 3 months, there was, let's say, problems with the communication, with the traveling. However, with Turkey, since beginning of March almost, we have these problems, and still these quarantine measures are applicable for people coming from Turkey, that which is not giving us possibilities of taking technical trainings and supports required as a startup. Out of this meeting with the clients, discussing new projects, quality audits, technical workshops, quality excellence workshops, visits, they were all suspended during this pandemic period, starting from March until now. And we cannot foresee how it's going to be in the next months. However, after June, things started a bit moving around, but still unpredictable, and we have to still let's say expect some easy measures like quick tests at the airports, as mentioned before, and in order to allow this circulation. The digital communication nowadays is for sure is very important and very supportive for our communication with our clients or suppliers, but always face-to-face, one-on-one meetings are more valuable and more understandable for both sides. Therefore, I believe the importance of the, let's say, traveling around, it will be very, let's say, very high and very powerful in developing quickly the business. Starting from March on, there was a sharp decrease in automotive industry, saying I'm working in. Most of the companies, they were working from home. The production lines stopped or worked for half capacity. However, since we are the startup, we had to work, and luckily up to now, no cases occurred in the company, but this was also a threat for the companies to continue smoothly their operation. Now, what we have seen, what I do see actually, the demand of goods and needs are suspended or postponed. But I do believe if we can get these measures like quick tests, circulation of the people throughout Europe and through Turkey to Poland or to any European country, this will help, let's say, quick recovery and hopefully these needs will come, let's say, in the extensive way that in the future the demand will increase rapidly as the needs, let's say, they postponed during the pandemic period. So this is, for example, is a case now, since the automotive recap slowly, because the people, they're afraid of going with the public transports. Mostly they started to invest in cars, automotive, and therefore there was a period in summer that the car prices goes up, even the second hands, and you can see the increase of the production for these 3 or 4 months. However, the back industry, the suppliers, which dropped their production, today they have difficulties to reach to the demand volume. Anyway, we believe in short time there will be some quick solutions to solve the traveling between the countries, especially between, let's say, third countries out of European Union, that we can ease projects, we can discuss more deeply, and we can have more circulation around, that we can grow faster in Europe with the Turkish investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this important contribution from you. We will now move to our next speaker. That's Dr. Mehmet Göktürk İplikçioğlu. Please, you are the chairman of the Turkpol Association, and you can introduce yourself, what you do, and you have the floor.
Hi from Warsaw. So thank you for this opportunity to discuss in this important topic, and thank you to the audience for being with us today. I'm Göktürk İplikçioğlu. I am chairman of Turkpol Association and also development economist, investing since 2001 in international higher education sector. Turkpol was founded in 2016 in Poland to build strong cultural and business relations between Poland and Turkey. Since its foundation in 2016, Turkpol has grown rapidly. It has today more than 300 members who are mainly business professionals and academicians. We are here today, experts and business professionals from different sectors. And so I am actively working and investing in international higher education sector, and would like to describe the situation from different perspective with different arguments. As you know, the global higher education landscape has dramatically changed in the past few months due to the spread of the coronavirus. We are basically facing all the problems of the sector and trying to solve all of them to survive. So students across the higher education sector have been dramatically impacted by the spread of the coronavirus, from travel restrictions to quarantines, border closures, flight cancellations, difficulties with visa applications, and of course health concerns, which blocks the students to travel from one country to the other and make their, impossible to make come their dreams true. So we should be ready to hear this all next few more months, even years probably. It's clear that students have changed their plans to study abroad as a result of the coronavirus. International students are permanent travelers, in my opinion, tourists willing to learn new cultures and countries. They are keeping traveling and using each free moment to do this. Hotels, hostels, airlines, railway, and international bus companies are influenced by COVID-19, also because they lost millions of international students traveling abroad from country to country. I think one of the best example for this situation is the Erasmus Plus students. A lot of tour companies, dormitories, and hotels declared, for example, in Poland, bankruptcy because lack of clients. Dormitories and hostels are empty first time in last 10 years in the middle of the academic semester, and tour operators cannot afford to organize even local tours because they cannot build even small groups for simple city tours from Warsaw to Krakow. And COVID-19 directly affected the international higher education sector, but the fact that the students could not travel actually affected not only universities, language courses, or the agencies, but also flight companies and touristic facilities, or the tour companies are affected. So today, it is actually not possible to say no sector is independent from the other. And we are dependent on each other in the global world. The long-term continuation of the pandemic and blocks may be effective on the young generation, future decisions, and it may cause them to stay in their home country and study online. So in my opinion, this will hit the international education sector and cause great damage to European travel companies as well. So we have to find long-term solutions. And in my opinion, blocks and closed borders cannot be solution against the pandemic. So this is the topic from my perspective, and I hope we will find a long-term solution in post-pandemic period. And as I mentioned, in different sectors, we are just as a network working. So we are just dependent each other, and I hope this solution will be for all of us. So thank you for your time, and I will be ready for your questions after.
Thank you very much for this insightful description of the problems of the international student sector. Last but certainly not least on my list is now Enrique Flores Schäfer. Mr. Flores Schäfer is Vice President of Guy Carpenter, an important insurance brokerage company that links worldwide insurers with worldwide reinsuring companies, if I understand correctly his work. He is dealing, in a sense, with a bird-eyes view on a daily basis with risks to big companies and conglomerates that have substantially changed and in most cases increased with the pandemic. Mr. Flores Schäfer, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Michael Rupp, and thank you very much to IPEC Tekdemir for the opportunity to participate in this forum today. I hope that today I can provide you with a quick overview of the view or the point of view of the insurance market, of the international insurance market relating to the pandemic. As you know, the insurance market is a support industry to many other industries, as can be the travel industry or the education industry or industry as a whole. Just a quick introduction on myself. So yes, my name is Enrique Flores. I work for a company called Guy Carpenter. We are #1 insurance and reinsurance broker worldwide, and my work involves working with insurance companies that themselves need insurance. So that gives us a good perspective of what's going on globally. So briefly, what has been the impact of the pandemic in the insurance industry to start with? I think it's two main points. First, as an insurer, insurers are paying claims worldwide. Today, we are expecting the total bill of insurance relating to the pandemic to exceed $100 billion. But also that's the main role of insurers, to pay claims. So that's what we have paid up to now, or the insurance hasn't paid up to now. It's a bill that's growing up as we speak. But also the insurance industry is a big investor, and that has been affected quite a lot as well, as the volatility created by the pandemic has affected the results of the insurance companies. But even though, $100 billion, that may seem like a lot of money, if we take that into consideration of the whole insurance industry, well, that's about, let's say, a big windstorm season in the United States. It's considerable, but it's something that the industry can and is absorbing. However, and perhaps this is the most important point, that this $100 billion that the industry is paying really pales in comparison to the economic damage that our countries are suffering, and also pales very much in respect of the fiscal stimulus that governments are implementing. According to different counts, we can consider between 5 to 10 trillion US dollars globally. So that's a ratio of, let's say, 1 to 50 or 1 to 100 relating to what insurance is paying out. So in particular, the risk of pandemic is really a risk of great magnitude, not necessarily very well insured globally, hence this difference between payouts and the fiscal stimulus. But it's also a very difficult risk to insure. And why is this so? Essentially because the insurance is based on risk diversification. For example, we take the aviation industry. Insurers can pretty much safely insure every aircraft in the world because we work on the assumption that not all aircraft will crash at the same time. And this statistical certainty allows insurers to pay the claims of the few with the premiums of the many. However, the pandemic is of a very different nature. It is systemic, meaning that all industries and all countries suffer the impact of the pandemic roughly at the same time. And this makes it really difficult for not only for the insurance industry, but particularly for the insurance industry. But what can we do about it? And what is the insurance industry doing about it? What we're calling today, and as a company, we're calling is for a partnership, because this is the typical way in which the insurance industry solves these sort of problems. It's a partnership, first and foremost, between the insurance companies of the world that need to work through cooperation as opposed to competition, and together provide insurance to those companies who need it. But this risk is particularly big. It's much bigger than what the insurance industry can sustain on its own. So we also need a partnership with the state who can provide a backstop for market claims that in the annual aggregate exceed a certain threshold. This model of public-private partnership that I'm describing has been used successfully in numerous countries to fight the most difficult risks. And for an example is the terrorism risk after 9/11. It suffered, like pandemic is happening now, it suffered a shortfall in supply for insurance. And to reactivate supply, governments and insurers set up structures that allowed to start the pump again of insurance. And this is something that we can do in this case for the pandemic risk. Our company has been involved in particular in the creation of many of these structures across the world. And today we are in advanced talks in different countries, with insurance associations and with governments to set up these structures to provide the insurance of the future for the pandemics. And to close these remarks, I would just like to say that every one of us needs to choose the way in which we can contribute to the recovery of our economies. This is our way of doing so, to help mitigate the financial impact of the pandemic. And with this, thank you very much for listening to my remarks. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much for this interesting perspective and the clear points that you've made. So you want, as an insurance industry, a backstop to the risks that you're underwriting. You're looking for public-private partnerships, like you say, for the time when terrorism was the most prevalent risk for you, and something in this area. This will certainly be interesting to take forward at the political level. This brings us now to the end of the initial remarks and to our discussion rounds. We have two ways of going about it. If you want to be given the floor, each and one of you, please just raise your hand into the camera like in a real meeting room. And I will take note and then give you the floor. You can comment on each other's points or maybe add certain aspects that you think are important. And we can also have our viewers who can ask questions by typing messages. And we have already seen one which was from Xavi Maura, who asked basically, what can governments and states do for startups which have suffered like many other companies in this pandemic? Either I would like to give this question now to you, or if you want to make some remarks and additional comments, please raise your hand so we know you want to speak. At this moment in time, that doesn't seem to be. Yes, please, Mr. Mentes.
Actually, being a startup, I want to say something. And now we started in March the serial production this year. So the government put some rules, but however, since we had no operations on the backwards, we couldn't benefit from many of them. I would say any of them. But because we started in March, we had an increasing sales in April, May, June. Therefore, it was not according to the given rules, and we couldn't benefit as a startup. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no immediate calls for the floor, I have one question to Mr. Flores Schäfer. What is your current timeline scenario for this pandemic? What are you evaluating as possible scenarios internally, and how do you deal with the uncertainty of how long this pandemic will last?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm afraid it's a very difficult one. Of course, we do have analysts who are working on this topic, and we model what is the impact of the pandemic and what could be the duration. However, I have to say these are only really high level estimates, and we don't have much more information than anyone else. I think what's important is to try to adapt to the existing environment. I think we are certainly doing that under the assumption that this crisis could take at least a year. We have to plan ahead and make sure that our systems and our models are working for long-term impact of this pandemic. Hopefully, we should have a shorter impact, but at this stage, I think it's way too expensive to assume that we will do so.
Thank you very much indeed. We are all looking into the crystal ball, and nobody has a clear view on the way out. We all hope for the best, but it's of course not easy. I have a question to Mehmet Göktürk. Visa data from students can provide a clear indication of the impact of border closures and new travel restrictions. Is, from your point of view, the overseas students, international students sector completely dead, or are there pockets of where exchanges can still occur, or is it like a blanket zero everywhere?
Thank you for your question. It's a very important question for my sector, actually, because we are dependent of the visas, especially for students from China, India. So they are, let's say, biggest player in the market. So and Indian and Chinese agencies as well. So yes, definitely, overseas students numbers are falling alarm. So and all over the world, especially in EU, USA, Canada, and Australia. So the visa granting was put on hold in line with travel restrictions. So student visa grants numbers for all nationalities, but particularly Indian and Chinese students began falling in February and have dropped significantly And yeah, and I can say the same for students from Nepal, from Pakistan, and so even students have no right to apply for visa. They don't have appointment for some EU countries, like for Poland, for example. So we had hundreds of candidates from India. They got right to study. They even paid for the study programs, but they couldn't apply for visa. So I don't know how long it will keep like that. So for Turkish students, I cannot say the same. So it is depend of the relation between the countries. Of course, there will be let's say students who will have right to study abroad, but sadly it is not same for all, and I don't know when it will change. I hope there will be some solution for those students as well. So million of them are waiting for visa, but they cannot start their study programs. So this is the actual situation, and we all hope it will change in let's say coming months.
Thank you very much for that. Maybe Frank van den Steen, as somebody who looks at the aviation industry, what's the medium-term scenario that you can see?
Well, there was also this question about the tourism sector, and it's quite linked to it. I mean, the tourism sector, firstly, is hit in its liquidity. I mean, that's where governments' bailouts currently are very necessary in order to overcome this liquidity problem. Mr. Mentes just mentioned also the numbers of sorry, it was Mr. Flores who mentioned the numbers of 5 to 10 trillion US dollars bailouts, and I think these are the most necessary. Now, I mentioned that it will take until, let's say, 2024 until we're back at 2019 levels. However, I do think that we need to distinguish between business and the leisure travel. I agree with Mr. Mentes that traveling will be and remain an important part of the business. However, I do believe that business travel demand will need a much longer time to recover from the current drop. Tourism demand, in my view, will bounce much faster. That's why I'm much more optimistic. And I do think there that the number of 2024 might be a bit too far out. I think that there I have a good feeling that by 2022 we might be back at 2019 levels. But of course, a very big variation in what types of leisure travel we are talking about. If it's pure tourism, if it's individual travel, if it's long haul travel. Short-haul travel, it's very, very differentiated.
Thank you very much for that very optimistic view. Indeed, I think many of us who liked traveling were still under some kind of trauma, or this is an ongoing trauma that nobody can go anywhere. This is quite interesting that you think this will bounce back more quickly. And I think I would say I agree. I think on the business side, maybe the medium term will also be that more and more meetings are going to be online, simply because people have seen certain things can be done online, and mission costs and business trip costs can be taken out of a difficult business equation, especially in a difficult economic environment. And we have seen some questions from the audience about small-scale enterprises. Will they be bailed out as well? Of course, I don't have to emphasize that large-scale enterprises like Lufthansa have for example, received substantial state support. The question is, of course, what do we do for small businesses, medium-sized businesses? Will they have the same chances? Are there any views from the speakers, or what could be done or what should be done?
Maybe Michael, I can comment from our perspective on this point. I think one of the key points for small enterprises is in granting funds or assistance is that access is extremely difficult. When we're talking about small enterprises, we are talking about huge numbers of companies, and with considerable due diligence that is required to make sure that funds are distributed in an adequate way. One way of achieving that is to work with existing channels that have contacts with SMEs in different countries. One of the proposals that the insurance industry has done also to assist the pandemic is to make sure that insurers who understand the risks of SMEs can assist in distributing funds in addition to insurance. This is not part of the current role of insurers. Insurers are there to understand and quantify risk, but they can also indemnify, as they currently do, for claims. But this is a sort of a different process within insurance companies, claims payment, that can be used to distribute government funds in an equitable way and in a way that reaches the largest number of companies possible, regardless of their size.
Thank you very much for that interesting suggestion. We are now already at 5 minutes to 3, and we had scheduled this online talk for 50 minutes. I think we have had quite an interesting round of discussions. I believe indeed this pandemic has shown the many areas where we need change, where a change is necessary, also in view of modernizing our economies to make it let's say a better way of using resources. It's also interesting to see how I believe the change of trade patterns will be going on in the next couple of years. I believe there will be diversification away from faraway places to maybe have supply chains in markets closer to the markets where things are to be sold. So possibly a move away from Chinese supply chains to countries closer to home, as European, of course. For example, India is a country that is closer than China and can take over maybe some of the supply chains that we had in different industries very far away. But this is, of course, very much speculation, and I'm sure we will have more chances to meet up, all of us online, to discuss these issues in the future. I believe for now, I would like to thank all the participants here around the virtual table, all the viewers, and we will get reports of how many we had later on. I believe with the Institute for Non-Aligned Studies and the EU-Turkey Friendship Group, we will make available this video also online thereafter. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you or some of you for future rounds of discussions. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.